Yo, what's up YouTube? So I have a very interesting video to discuss today. It's about eminent domain and how it has systemically fucked over black people in the past. So eminent domain is where the government comes in, takes your property and supposedly is meant to compensate you for the market value of that property. Unfortunately, historically, governments have often abused this power to keep racial segregation alive. Such was the case for Bruce's Beach. So where is Bruce's Beach and what is Bruce's Beach? Well, it's not in the middle of nowhere. No, Bruce's Beach is actually in the middle of Los Angeles. It's right next to the airport. So why is this little beach relevant? Well, it's relevant because back in the day, this was the only beach that black residents in Los Angeles could visit. 2 parcels of the beach was purchased by this entrepreneurial couple back in 1912. They did everything by the books. They invested their money and bought a beautiful piece of real estate, which they shared with other black Americans that couldn't go to other beaches. They really turned it into a resort with bathhouses, dining rooms, and they let other black people come and build cottages on their land. According to historian Allison Jefferson, they were pioneers. They came to California, bought property, enjoyed the beach, and made money. They did what every other Californian was doing at the time. But white neighbors resented Bruce's growing popularity. Tires were slashed. The KKK purportedly set a mattress under the main deck and torched a black-owned home nearby. One of the neighbors was Peck. He erected fake 10-minute parking signs to deter black people from actually going there. He also made them walk around the perimeter of his block, which he had lined with security and no trespassing signs. Ultimately, this meant that black beachgoers had to walk an extra half a mile to reach the beach. Ultimately, the government became involved and seized the Bruce's property using eminent domain law. And what was the reason they needed it? Was it a school or hospital? No, they cited an urgent need for a public park. Unfortunately, you can't make this shit up. A park? Really? Come on. So they did sue the government and they ended up getting $14,500, which is a decent amount. We'll go through the inflation soon, but the saddest part of this story is that they went from entrepreneurs, resort owners, to dying working as chefs. That's just tragic. One of Bruce's descendants, Anthony Bruce, many generations later says, this history continues to tear his family apart. His grandfather Bernard, born a few years after the condemnation, was obsessed with what happened and lived his life extremely angry at the world. Well, I can't blame him. In a 2007 interview with The Times, Bernard said, how would you feel if your family owned the world off and they took it away from you? He recalled how friends and people he knew would mock him when he said that his family once owned a beach. So if you do think that this is an injustice, you can sign the petition. So when this LA Times article was written, they had close to 10,000 signatures. Now they have gone up to, 13,000. And I just signed it, so 13,006. Now we can do the numbers crunching. So it'd be worth about 75 million today. So in 1912, they bought the property for $1,200. So $1,200 back then would be about $32,000 today. So it's a decent investment, you know. After years of litigation, they finally settled with the government in the 1930s sometime for $14,500, which would be around $300,000 in today's money. This was only half of what they were asking from the government though. If the government had known how much the property would be worth in 2020, they should have given them close to $4 million back in 1935. Because that's equivalent to $70 million today. Here are the members of the Bruce family today. All of these people missed out on generational wealth totaling $70 million. There's about 70 people here, so really they should have got $1 million each, and this is how systemic racism has historically worked in terms of generational wealth. I'd love to say this is the only time it's happened, but it's not. Here is a village that was in Central Park that was predominantly of African American inhabitants. It was the first free black community in New York. The village was founded in 1825, and by 1855 it had around 200 to 300 inhabitants, 2/3 of which were African American. By 1857, everyone had to leave. What's interesting, according to the Central Park website, is that 1/3 of the inhabitants were Irish. So it was basically an Irish and African American community. People forget how discriminated the Irish were in early America. The first KKK chapter was actually against Irish Catholicism, and there was many riots between the groups. What's relevant to the African American perspective is that New York required African Americans to own at least $250 in property and hold residency for 3 years in order to be able to vote. Before its demolition, it was actually building up a lot of infrastructure. It had schools, gardens, cemeteries, and as many as 300 residents. It was stigmatized by many in New York as being a shanty town, but according to Central Park website, most of the homes there were 2 stories and most of the homeowners were homeowners and not leases or renters, you know. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end and all valuable black land must become a park. Now let's do some quick maths. So unfortunately, I couldn't find an estimate for the village, but my math skills are pretty good and I found one for Central Park, $39 trillion. The village itself was 5 acres out of a possible 846 acres for all of Central Park. So now we can do the maths. $39 trillion divided by 846 acres means that each acre is worth $46 billion. So we divide 1 acre by 300 people because that was the total residents of the village, which means each person should get $153 million. But no, we have to times that by 5 because the village was 5 acres, which means each resident should have got close to over $700 million. So there would be around 200 black billionaires in New York if it wasn't for this transgression. And this, my friends, you can call the legacy of systemic racism and the hurdles it presents for generational wealth. Da Vinci, that's got to be it, right? No, not even close. We haven't even got to Black Wall Street yet. There's a lot to cover in terms of Black Wall Street, so we'll just do a quick little synopsis. How did it come into fruition? Well, it was the brainchild of O.W. Gurley, a wealthy African-American from Arkansas, moved to Tulsa and purchased over 40 acres of land that he made sure was only sold to other African-Americans. So this gave great economic opportunities to African-Americans. The minimum wage in the area was higher. The dollar circulated in the area for much longer. The city had banks, hotels, cafes, movie theaters, contemporary homes. It was actually richer than the surrounding white areas. So how did Black Wall Street come tumbling down? Did they want to build another park? No, this time it was a bit more brutal. So what happened was a white woman was allegedly raped by an African American. And instead of waiting for the judicial process, they did what crazy people do. They burnt down the black city. 9,000 people became homeless and 300 people lost their lives. And here, my friends, is an image of Black Wall Street before it was burnt to the ground. So as you can see, black people have been economically screwed over by the government many a times. Let's talk about black wealth creation today. If Black America were a country, it would be the 15th wealthiest nation in the world, according to Larry Elder. Is this a true statement? Well, according to PolitiFact, it's not quite as simple as that. If we were looking at GDP, then it would be the 16th largest. And if you're looking at GDP per capita, it would be the 44th largest, which is still a significant economy. So I went in search for another statistic that I'm sure you've heard before. You know the one about the black dollar only circulating within the black community for 6 hours and for whites and Asians it's about 20 days? Yeah, that one. Well, I tried to find a source for it and the only thing I could find was Complex. I didn't want to use Complex as a source, come on now. So I went somewhere else. I went to this fact-checking website to see where this comes from because I could not find a source. So they did an amazing in-depth analysis and they found that there is no real source. It was cited in this book from 1996 that made a mention of the statistic but gave no source themselves. So here is the verdict. The claim that a dollar circulates in the black community for only 6 hours cannot be substantiated. The federal government does not produce data that would allow such a comparison. In addition, economists contacted said some of the data cited, such as information about dollars circulated in the Jewish community, questionable because the federal government does not collect information by religion, and researchers would be unable to get information accurately from a survey of consumers. The earliest source for this statistic appears to be in a book that is nearly 20 years older. Well, it's older than that now because this is a few years old itself. The book also never mentions the name of the study nor provides any information about the author. Economic experts agree that blacks may spend little of their estimated $1.1 trillion in buying power with black business, and they agree that efforts like Anderson's to patronize those businesses are laudable goals. But they add that proponents should stop using the 6-hour figure because while it's shocking, it cannot be verified. One statistic that can be verified from the 2014 State of Black America report can be found on 186, and it goes as follows. According to a landmark Northwestern University Kellogg Business School study based on the empowerment experiment, out of close to $1 trillion in black buying power, maybe 3% of that goes to black professionals, suppliers and firms. But if black households with an annual income of $75,000 or more, in other words middle and upper class African Americans, were to increase spending with black professionals and firms from 3% to 10%, we would create close to 1 million jobs. So there you go, guys. If you want to increase the betterment of black economy, then support black business and hire black professionals. Please give this video a like and subscribe. Until next time, peace.